Hello my soccer universe. Well, over the past few days I've mostly focused on European qualifying and the Nations League. There was also of course World Cup qualifying all around the world outside of Europe, and yes, this European here is very much focused on Europe, but we always have to look a little bit outside as well to get outside of the bubble. And it was quite exciting. We have a total of 6 nations qualifying, 2 of which for the very first time ever. Yes, the expanded format does help in there. It's still kind of amazing that these nations have qualified. One of those, and I'm not spoiling anything, is of course South Korea, who missed out in the last window to already secure qualifying. They get the job done. But we also look at who else qualified from Asia, because now we have an almost complete picture from there. Round 3 is complete, and then we go further into CONCACAF for the first time on this channel for this World Cup, and then of course also into South America. So let's run through the results of match day 9 and let's go group by group. In Group A, Uzbekistan needed a solitary point at the UAE to secure the first time ever qualification, and they get the job done, grinding out a 0-0 draw, while Qatar beat already qualified Iran 1-0 at home to secure at least a spot in round 4. In Group B, Jordan took a big 3-0 away win at Oman, which put them already in a pretty good position of qualifying. And when South Korea beat Iraq 2-0 away from home, both goals come in second half, a first half red card for Iraq as well, it was secured that Jordan, who have been in the Asian Cup final last year, also will go for the first time to the World Cup, and joining South Korea, who, as I said, needed only a solitary point, got the job done. In Group C, the biggest result was of course Australia, who were sitting in a good position in the table, however had a pretty steep schedule in those final rounds, having to play Japan, already qualified though, but they have been romping through this group, and Saudi Arabia to secure qualification, and they got a huge 1-0 win at home against Japan, with the winning goal coming in the 90th minute through Behic. That put Australia already in a pretty good position, and then with Saudi Arabia only beating Bahrain 2-0, it was clear that in the final match day, Saudi Arabia would need to beat Australia by 5 goals. Then on the final match day of round 3, things were more or less settled in Group A. We knew Iran, Uzbekistan qualify, and the UAE and Qatar will go into the round 4. Still, Uzbekistan beating Qatar 3-0 at home was great celebration for them, but a rather surprising result for the host nation of the last World Cup and the twice defending Asian champions. In Group B, the last thing to be decided was the last spot in round 4 between Oman and Palestine, and it was a head-to-head. Palestine taking on Oman, needing a win, and actually had a lead in the 49th minute through Kharoub. Then even Oman had a player sent off with a yellow-red card in the 73rd minute. However, at the 97th minute, a penalty by Al-Sabi sees Oman move on to round 4. And while it was billed as the big showdown between Saudi Arabia and Australia for the last direct ticket to the World Cup from Group C, Australia just needed to not lose by a whole lot. As I said, a 5-goal scoreline would have taken Saudi Arabia through, and Saudi Arabia took the lead in 90th minute through. Al Boud was a rather weird goal where he basically stumbled and in the end the ball over the line. But there was only one more chance. Saudi Arabia really failed to create chances, and when Metcalf in the 42nd minute gets the equalizer, the game was more or less done, and then Duke in the 48th minute heads it in for a 2-1 win for Australia. Saudi Arabia cannot even push back, and so Australia through to the World Cup, Saudi Arabia and Indonesia going into the 4th round. And the format of this round 4 is a rather curious one, based on the FIFA World Ranking and not on positioning in round 3. I understand why, but I still find it weird. We will get 2 groups of 3 who play each other only once, and this is all done in October, within roughly a week. The winner of each group will go directly to the World Cup. The second place team will then go into round 5 to decide who goes into the intercontinental playoff, and the last place teams will be eliminated. Okay, I had to squeeze myself into this Costa Rica jersey to for the first time talk about CONCACAF qualifying for the 2026 World Cup. Of course, CONCACAF hosting the tournament. And we had in round 2 6 groups of 5 teams that only played once against each other according to a very laid out schedule. And curiously enough, these rounds were played in June of 24 and June of 25, so ample of time in between. I think you could have afforded probably a double elimination. However, I guess CONCACAF Nations League also played into that quite a bit. Here are the results of the 6 groups, and no direct qualification spots have been handed out so far. We have Group A, Honduras winning ahead of Bermuda, Cuba missing just out as Bermuda beat Cuba 2-1 away from home. In Group B, Costa Rica had a perfect record as well, like Honduras had in Group A. However, it was between Trinidad and Grenada, who will move on to the 3rd round on the last day. Trinidad lost 2-1 at Costa Rica, whereas Grenada only beat St. Kitts and Nevis 3-2 away from home, meaning that Trinidad move on. In Group C, Curaçao and Haiti had already secured their 2 spots ahead of the last round. However, I still found it rather surprising that Curaçao actually finished on top. Not only that, they beat Haiti 5-1. In Group D, it was Panama and Nicaragua who were superior to their opponents in their group. In Group E, we had Jamaica and Guatemala qualifying, also clearly better than the rest of the group. And Suriname finish in first place in Group F, and they're joined by El Salvador, who just squeak in over Puerto Rico. Now, how does the qualifying continue? Today, actually, on the day I'm shooting this video, but I didn't want to postpone the video, we have the draw for round 3, which will be 3 groups of 4 teams. So all the teams that I have qualified will be, according to the FIFA World Ranking, distributed among these 3 groups. Top qualifies for the World Cup. The 2 best second place teams then will go into the intercontinental playoff. As CONCACAF is hosting, they do get an additional slot in the intercontinental playoff. And let's finish our journey throughout the world with the longest qualifying campaign, which is of course CONMEBOL qualifying for the 6 +1 spots from South America. The +1 is because one team will go into the continental playoff and most likely will qualify. At least I would expect that, given the status of South America in that game. On match day 15, so we are talking a really long round, we had Ancelotti making his debut for Brazil, playing in Ecuador. And you would say Ecuador, that is a team that Brazil should beat easily. However, Ecuador is one of the best teams in South America at this very moment, and they were sitting in a 2nd spot, even though they were docked 3 points. So a major achievement there for Ecuador, and I think that point doesn't reflect that badly on Brazil. However, the game was kind of blah. Paraguay got a pretty huge 2-0 win over Uruguay, which already put them on the cusp of qualifying, whereas Argentina get another win at the last place team, Chile. Just 10 years ago, those two were big rivals. This time it's a Julian Alvarez goal to beat the hapless Chileans. But it was the last 2 games that really counted in a fight for the last qualification spot, because I think the other 5 are pretty clear, and the intercontinental spot. Peru only managed a 0-0 at Colombia, or should I say it otherwise, Colombia only managed a 0-0 against Peru, which does not really help either of these teams. Peru will most likely not make it into the playoff spot, whereas Colombia still have to hang on for this last qualifying spot. But it was Venezuela's 2-0 win over Bolivia. Venezuela probably will not qualify directly, and this is the only South American team that have never been at a World Cup, but they get themselves a huge advantage over Bolivia, beating them 2-0 at home. A Cuellar own goal in the 5th minute already set Venezuela on the track, and then Samuel Rondon in the 30th minute seals the deal. At that point, Venezuela had a 4-point cushion over Bolivia for this intercontinental playoff spot. And how much needed this advantage was for Venezuela was then seen in match day 16, where Bolivia beat Chile 2-0 at home, and Venezuela ended up losing against Uruguay away from home, also expected. So it's back to just a single point between these 2 nations. Argentina played a 1-1 draw against Colombia. Colombia actually had a lead through Luis Diaz in the 24th minute. Enzo Fernandez wasn't even sent off with a red card, and still Almada gets the equalizer. Again, a result that is not really helping Colombia and didn't matter all that much for Argentina. Brazil, though, despite all their troubles, do qualify for the World Cup thanks to a 1-0 win over Paraguay. Vinicius Jr. getting the winning goal in the 44th minute, and actually looked already a teeny bit better than they had done before. So Brazil will be at the next World Cup, and curious enough, the bookies have them in 2nd spot, which I don't quite see, but the last time Brazil was struggling to qualify, they actually became World Cup winners. And Ecuador do likewise, and again a major achievement by the Ecuadorians. They are in second spot with 3 points deducted from them. They managed a 0-0 draw at Peru. Peru really would to have needed a win to keep their chances alive to make it into the continental playoff, but that is now going down between most likely Venezuela and Bolivia. Potentially Colombia could get dragged into it. So if we look at the current standings in South America, we see that Ecuador and Brazil have 25 points. They cannot be caught anymore by Venezuela on the last 2 match days. That's why they're through. And Uruguay and Paraguay technically only need 1 point as well, but they're really close to qualifying already. And so it's maybe down to Colombia, Venezuela and Bolivia, and with Colombia having a decided advantage. And if we look now at the final 2 match days, it's really interesting. Venezuela have to go to Argentina. You wouldn't expect a whole lot from there. Whereas Colombia take on Bolivia. Should Colombia win that one, they are at least secured of the intercontinental playoff. Should Venezuela lose to Argentina, Colombia win, Colombia are also through to the World Cup. And then it goes down to the last match day where Bolivia hosts Brazil and Venezuela also take on Colombia. So Colombia play both of these opponents, and that is actually quite dicey. Venezuela against Colombia is very much a regional rivalry, so this will be heated even if Colombia would have nothing to play for. And so we end our journey through World Cup qualifying. It's quite exciting to see so many teams already qualified when some teams in Europe have not even started their qualifying campaign. That just boggles a little bit the mind, shows you the different schedules. That Japan were already qualified in March is one of those things that it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I also have to say the qualifying format in Asia is way too convoluted and messy. I also feel that in CONCACAF having all these weird groups of 5 where they only play once against each other, I think this was just made to eliminate teams rather quickly and then move on to the meat and potatoes. And yes, CONCACAF qualifying is stripped of the 3 host nations of the next World Cup, which also takes down the suspense a teeny little bit. South America though, I find the qualifying format maybe a little bit odd overall, that everyone plays against everyone. However, I think South Americans really live for that, and I think it's great in that sense. It also has this nice rhythm. You have the Copa America, then you go into World Cup qualifying, and yes, handing out 6 qualifying spots for 10 nations seems a little bit non-exciting. However, we are going down to the last few match days to have actually qualification spots decided, because overall it is quite level. It only tails off at the very end Peru and Chile, sadly. So in any case, please let me know what you thought about World Cup qualifying outside of Europe. Did your team do well in there? Are you happy that Uzbekistan and Jordan made it for the first time to the World Cup? And what do you think about Brazil's chances? Drop a line below. Give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video. Subscribe to my channel if you want to see more. I'll talk to you soon about more things in my soccer universe. Bye! Hey there! I really hope you enjoyed this video. And if you did, here are some videos and playlists that you might enjoy too. Also, please consider subscribing to my channel and hit the little bell icon so you get notified whenever something happens in my soccer universe. And with that, have a wonderful day. Bye!